how much growth they want to see in the city of Portsmouth. Um, there's a little bit to be desired among how much they are energetic about new projects. And I mentioned this because I think it's been the past couple council meetings we would have an example of Councilmember Barnes trying to say something along the lines of, great, this new project is coming in, but it's like just all we have new things are car washes or something along to that effect. So that's the type of thing I would be interested in seeing a Mr. Tillage or a Mr. Hugel speak and say, hey, we're actually trying to bring in a lot more impactful businesses than just another car wash. And so far, I haven't seen it as much. I think that they're interested in that overall, but they're not there yet, if that makes sense.
It's good that you mentioned that, and I believe because they're new on city council and they got to get their sea legs, and they're probably uh, working behind the scenes, but it takes time to get good businesses to come in, other than car washes. And you're correct, and Barnes is correct on that. Nothing but car washes, but I would even go further and say, Mr. Barnes, what have you done to bring a businesses here other than car washes? And yes, you could throw this thing, throw the dogs off the scent
Mm-hmm.
of the stench that you've up there, but what have you done?
Yeah, if you permit me, I'll compare it again
Yeah.
to Virginia Beach. I still work in Virginia Beach with the Parks and Recreation Department. I think here in Portsmouth, he has a good reputation with the Parks and Rec himself. But when I leave a afternoon shift and I happen to be leaving the rec center and I see it says Civic League meeting, I still want to pop in to something like that in Virginia Beach. And the last one I did that to, which was about 2 weeks ago, was actually more of a community outreach thing. I noticed Virginia Beach Councilwoman Henley there, Councilwoman Wilson was there, and it wasn't so much a civic league as it was an outreach about Amazon building a warehouse in a certain area of Virginia Beach. And a lot of citizens were out there like, how is this going to change like the traffic patterns and stuff in my neighborhood? That's what they were concerned about. But in the end, it always feels like it's a foregone conclusion in Virginia Beach that those big type of businesses are going to come there. And this brings back to Portsmouth. Well, I mean, what would be the chances that we might see something like a big international business like an Amazon want to put a warehouse in Portsmouth? And then what would be the feedback? What would be, uh, let's say, the citizens as I look out at my window in West Haven, would they come out to an outreach meeting and say, hey, that's actually not the type of business we like? And is that the reason why it's only car washes? I don't know. That's the balance. That's the type of stuff that you want to, you hopefully you want your council people to be engaging on because they could also help bring in the larger businesses with their enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. And you're correct. I think that the members of the city council have to be a representative and reflect the citizens. And so when a big business is, or any kind of business is looking to expand and coming into a city, they look at the city council and they see one, the functioning of the city council. Can we bring, and if I bring my families here, do they have good schools? Do we have a labor force that can support my new business? Because if I bring a manufacturing place into a particular city, do I have enough skilled workers to take care of, that I could hire and actually pass the security clearance to get into my business?
Mm-hmm.
And then I boil that back down to I will say I'm not a real fan of Mr. Barnes, because I don't think he represents anything other than going backwards and putting he's like a lot of smoke and with no depth.
I mentioned just another anecdote of myself because I spend a lot of my time on social media talking
Mhm,
politics as well. So I'll be making a lot of comments on Facebook, and
mhm.
I'll give him one point in that he is very noticeable on social media, especially on Facebook. And
Yes.
you can see a lot of his comments. And of course, that leads to me, a citizen, who would comment under it. And he has been known to be a little, uh, I'm going to say insulting, but put offish a little bit. At least he was to me at one time. But I admit that's because I had made a comment that I think he had said some sort of post about how the citizens weren't liking this particular instance. And I said, or city council. And he just like, hey, get off my page. All you talk about is politics or something like that. I'm like, well, that was my interest. So,
Well, he's a politician.
yeah.
What you expect?
Yeah.
Colonel, Colonel, let me say this for people just joining in. We're here, morning Coffee Talks morning show, and we have a guest with us. This is the beginning of our series of the host talking to citizens. You just see one right now. We had another one scheduled, and I think he's having issues with his phone. His name was Jim Wright. As a matter of fact, Jim is, I think he's gearing up to run for office, one of the delegate positions. But anyway, we'll get him again the next time. And we have other people scheduled. We're creating a citizens list. So possibly once a month, we'll have these conversations with citizens and get an idea, get a pulse on how you feel about certain things. People that don't normally get a chance to express their concerns or how they feel, about the direction of the city of Portsmouth, as well as other national issues that are going on that trickle down and affect us socially. So we're here with Conrad Schensbender,
Shezventer, yeah, getting better every
Schensbender,
time.
and I got that right. And he's with us and discussing some of the issues here in the city of Portsmouth. And just wanted to get that out for people that are just tuning in, so they know what's going on. So, Colonel, you continue if you haven't finished.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll still. I think we were talking about Mr. Barnes and some of his antics, and you are correct that he is very visible on social media, and the effect of that is getting your name uh, out there and to be known in the public. And it is an old saying: uh, all publicity is good publicity. Even bad publicity is good. At least you have your name out there.
I'll do a little comparison here. I'm a big NASCAR fan, for instance. It goes back to when I was a child, and I remember watching old All Star races in like 1994, and they would bring up Dale Earnhardt on the screen, and they were like, "He's the straw that stirs the drink," and he would make a little saying like, "If they boo you or they cheer you, it doesn't matter if they were doing nothing. That's where it would be a problem." So, in
Hmm.
that vein, you're right. If you're a politician, you need to have your face among the people. They need to
Yeah,
know you. So whether or not they were jeering you or they're cheering you, you're making an impact compared to if they didn't know who you even were.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I'll chime in and say, it's good to be able to use the social media, to get to people that probably you won't normally contact. But once you do that and you're an elected official, you have to be open to all comments. You can't uh, dismiss the comments that are not in your favor. Once you open yourself up to the public like that, if you want all comments to agree with you, then you have a private chat
The
and you can
echo
control who comes in there. But once you open it up to the public and you're elected by the public, and this goes for anybody elected that uses social media to make contact with the public and talk more about their policies or how they feel about certain policies. You have to be open, and I noticed that too, Conrad. That some people, if they make comments that are not favorable uh, to him in particular, he will either block you or come back in a negative way on you. So hopefully he'll change that way, because once that's what we would expect more from a elected official if he's going to go public like that. You have to be open. You're opening yourself up to all people. But anyway, Conrad, let me ask you. As a new resident, and you keep going, as that, and you've already gone and spoken before city council, so you kind of hit the ground running when you came in here. So, but looking from afar, you watch Portsmouth. What kind of how did you feel about Portsmouth? Because all the press, as far as the crime and everything, and it seems like all the cities were experiencing some of the same thing as far as crime, but it seems like Portsmouth kind of sticks out there with people that don't live here, that will say, "I'm not going there," or they might go to Newport News or Hampton or Virginia Beach, and the same thing is happening. What kind of how did you look at Portsmouth before you came here? With because of the way the press sometimes treats us unfairly compared to some of the other cities.
I
And
think
did you feel that way?
Remember, I'm from Virginia Beach, so this is the same city that made pretty big local headlines back around 2016 because of the effort to stop light rail being expanded into Virginia Beach. A lot of the commentators who you might see on social media say that they are against light rail in Virginia Beach was because it would bring in an element from Norfolk or such that they didn't like, which is sort of the same meaning that they would have for Portsmouth in the sense it's a little bit more to their mind crime ridden or for some reason, and that means people who would be on the light rail coming to Virginia Beach would bring that to Virginia Beach. And
I remember that.
I think that's a media like Wave News 10, WTKR, WVEC on down type of thing. They have a tendency to want to show the type of things that are a little bit more, I guess, violent. And so that means that the daily shootings would be something that's all over wavy.com or something. And people over time would think, well, that's something that would only happen in Newport News or Portsmouth or Norfolk. It doesn't happen as much in Virginia Beach, even though that's probably not always true. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm coming to Portsmouth because I was looking for a good house. And I found a good house at a good price. And I have had no problems here in Portsmouth. It just gets just as hot in the summer here as it does in Virginia Beach. So I would imagine, especially because I like politics so much, I want to go out to the council meetings and get the run of the land. And it feels very similar, just different individuals. I will say it's a smaller city, not just geographically, but population-wise, it's considerably smaller than Virginia Beach. I think it's slightly less than 100,000 total people live in Portsmouth, and it's over 450,000 that's in Virginia Beach. So it's a different type of atmosphere, but I've enjoyed it. I like it. I would want to keep at it and keep learning more stuff because I want to see where it goes. I'll make another anecdote. A couple months back, I was going to find an Arby's in Portsmouth. The first time I'm trying to find an Arby's in Portsmouth because I wanted to bring home that new Wagyu beef burger for the wife. And I found it. And it was a couple more minutes out of the way, thusly a couple more minutes back. And I was driving through areas of Portsmouth back towards the house that I hadn't seen before. And it just felt like a type of city where there used to be a lot of stuff business-wise that are now gone. They've shut their doors, years have passed, and no one has come back into the buildings that they once were. So I just noticed it on that particular day. I'm like, Portsmouth could be more. So that circles back to the city council people. What is their vision of making it more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're quite right. Great observation, because that is the fact. There was a lot more going on, commercial business wise, in three major areas at the same time in the city of Portsmouth at one time: downtown, Mid City, and Tower Mall. So we have a lot to get back to that. I don't know if we ever get back to that, but there's some things we need to do. And we're going to go and talk about some national issues. But before we go there, I want to know how you feel about locally. Most people that run locally don't have to declare if they're Democrat or Republican or something like that. But At one time we never knew because most of the local candidates would not let you know. Some of them would, but and it seemed to be more Democrats would let you know than Republicans. That was just my observation back over the years. But do you feel like how important do you feel that like that is as far as coming out or the voters know what kind of political affiliation that local politicians might have before they put them in office? Because it might make a difference. But in the past, well, now you don't have to declare that. You don't have to tell people. So, but the national issues are very important as they trickle down to the local localities. So, my opinion, I think it's important to know their affiliation because it could affect some of the decisions they make because of their national affiliation with Democrats or Republicans. How do you feel about that?
I would find it to be pretty accurate. In 2018 and 19 and 20 were 3 consecutive years because of special elections. I was able to run for a city council in Virginia Beach. In 18, I wasn't a member of any party. And I felt like I could speak on issues and not sound like either one, Republican or Democrat. By the time it came to 2019 and into 2020, I did join the Democrat Party. But in that instance, it was more of a need to feel like I needed to identify publicly so people know who I am. Thusly, they can either take me more seriously or less seriously. And each year that went by, I gained more and more voters. Now, I still lost clearly all those races, but I had gotten a pretty good lesson on what is viewed as like negative politics in the sense that that is what the entire interest in politics sort of become, both for Republican and Democrat and independent people are interested in like a negative version of politics in the news cycle. Thusly, if you need to capture their attention, you need to be a part of it in some way. Otherwise, if you're too quiet, people aren't really going to know you, and thus they probably don't fully trust you in that weird sense. I remember going to a couple of the Virginia Beach Tea Party organizations. They would hold like forums, and I was a candidate, and then I would be very vocal about one particular thing, and at the end they were like, well, we're not going to vote for you, but at least we know officially where you stand on so many things, and they appreciated my candor. And I think that is something that we're probably going to have to do a lot more going forward, especially in municipal elections where, you don't have to declare that you are a Republican, you are a Democrat, you're a Libertarian or a socialist even, because that's not requisite. You don't need to be part of a party to do that. You can run your own little campaign and get by. Of course, like every party, more money means you're going to be more successful. But in terms of the ideology, you don't need it as much in terms of the municipal races until the past couple of years. So, for instance, if I was running in Portsmouth, I would be very vocal about where I am politically because I think I need to be.
Yeah, because I had to ask that because I think it's more important nowadays because suppose you're like me and you're not in favor of what Trump is doing, and I vote for somebody, and then later on I find out that they are a Trump supporter, and if I'd have known that, I probably wouldn't have voted for him. So I think that's that's the reason I mentioned that, and I think it's important now, more so nowadays than it was in the past, or at least and you did that. But some people are still holding that close to their vest until they get in office, and then you find out.
Yeah, to provide a Portsmouth example, I think I might point colloquially toward Councilman Moody, who's also very notable on Facebook, and I like that in a politician because I want to see what people think. But he's been on national politics a lot, very anti-Biden. A couple of years back, pro-Trump. I think he was pro the statue that was torn down in Portsmouth. But when he gets into the issues, he's just as either good or bad as you might see on other council members, and thusly he might be considered a good thing depending on your viewpoint when you remove the national aspect. So it'll make a point for you, make your name, but it won't necessarily mean you are good or bad if you're Republican or not on council.
Right. Yeah, and I believe that too. What say you, Colonel?
Well, let me go back to what you talking about, the light rail first, because I just couldn't get by that one. It's because yes, you talked about folks in a certain segment did not want light rail to come to Virginia Beach, and this is decades ago, and they could have done that when there was money out there, and they've could have done it 20 times as inexpensive as they want it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but when they say we didn't want to get it because we don't want this certain element to come here to Virginia Beach, that was coded message that yes, we don't want the crime increase, but we don't want people of color coming down to our Virginia Beach. And so that was also mainly of the Republican Party, which I call the Confederate Party today, and what they stood for, and what now and then, and that was an early version of what you mentioned, Trump, what he stands for, and all the Republicans that there support him stood for. So I just had to get that out there.
Yeah, I might add to that a little bit too. That I would agree with what he says about how we would view Virginia Beach citizens as. Is that really the reason you wanted to go with? It's not really budgetary. That's probably the way that they voted with in their minds, was that they didn't want that particular element. And then I give them some credence, and that there are other things in Virginia Beach that they're willing to be vocal against, but have already passed, like a sports center in Virginia Beach, which seems to be losing money now. And that would have been the same exact reason to be against it, like the light rail was, how you might lose money, but does it serve a purpose overall? Or do a lot of people just like to complain about money, and that's it? They're hands off past the point of complaining about the budget and not caring too much. At least in the sense of light rail, closer to 2016, I had less of an understanding of what is the better source of money for building stuff, whether it's a local tax issue, a state tax issue, or federal money. And I'm much more a fan now of federal expenditures, which is why if you got more and more federal funds to build light rail, I'd be more and more and more in favor of building light rail all over Hampton Roads. But that's just a general policy issue.
Mm-hmm. You're correct. And we could have gotten federal money to come in to help with the cost of that. And since the same thing with the tunnel downtown, could have gotten that, but you had a Republican governor at the time that ripshawed that project through and made sure that most of the construction business that they did in the oversight was down in Florida. And so they just they said they signed the worst construction contract in this country's history, where we'll be paying this toll long after we're all dust in some funeral home for another 48 years, and it'll be escalating with no sign of paying it off. And so they've already paid off this tunnel with the tolls and things. So
now they're just making money on it.
Now they're just making money on it. And so what kind of deal is that? That is pure lunacy.
It's cronyism.
Graft, and it's crime. It's a crime on the city. And there's no way out. And there has to be somewhere. You got to take it in litigation, says, okay, we're going to do this and just pay, this was the cost, send them a check or whatever. And by, or even if you have to tackle it by eminent domain, take that tunnel away from them. That's what I would do as a politician.
I like the eminent domain angle.
We got a Confederate governor. No guts.
No guts, all vest.
Yes. Yes.
So, Comrade and Colonel, we talk often about how important it is to pay attention to your local politics, because you usually are directly affected by whatever decisions our elected officials make. But it's also important, we try to stress it's also important to pay attention to the national scene. because a lot of things that are done on the national level trickle down and affect us. And a lot of times it trumps, well, excuse that word, but it trumps some of the policies that are made locally. It comes down in the form of mandates that overtake whatever local decisions have been made. So it's important for us to follow that too. And Conrad, I think you are one that follows the national politics as well. And how important it is to you, or what would you say to someone you sitting down having coffee with that just stays with the local scene? How would you convince them how important it is to pay attention to both as well as because just like I just mentioned, you might find out that you are electing somebody locally that on nationally they support someone nationally that you definitely are not in favor with. So what would your conversation be like to that person that just tries to stay local with
Well,
the issues?
first, I would have to ask them what are the local things that they care about the most. Could it be a zoning issue, or could it be something like their schools or the roads? The main local stuff becomes infrastructure projects. Then you have to be like, well, where does the funding come from? If you are really concerned about local politics, and they're going to be the ones who raise or not raise or keep the same their real estate taxes. And thusly, that's where the main funding of a city might come from. But that's not where all the funding comes from. So if you also branch out to, say, flooding mitigation, you're going to need a lot more money to come in from Richmond. So then you're going to need to look at, say, the state Senate and the delegate races. And we have big ones in Portsmouth too, say Nadarius Clark, for instance, and Louise Lucas. Um, those are politicians you need to look about what they stand on and how much money they could bring from Richmond down into Portsmouth, if possible. Same thing with, say, your national representatives, and Bobby Scott is the congressman here. And then you have Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. At least they're former governors. They know how to do some executive stuff, but now they're in the legislature. So, how much money of the federal taxation could they bring into the state of Virginia and thusly into Tidewater and thusly into Portsmouth? Especially when Portsmouth is so reliant on federal spending anyway, with as much military infrastructure that they have in Portsmouth. It's pretty big here, just like it is in Virginia Beach. Thusly, you need to care about national politics. So, if there is a big national swing that is particularly anti-military industrial complex, for example, then that means there's a possibility the overall military budget begins to stay static or goes in a diminishing route. Thusly, Portsmouth and Virginia Beach, the peninsula, a lot of that will see a lot less money come in. That could negatively affect the local budgets, which could negatively affect, say, how much money is directed towards schools or whatever. So trickle down is a good way to use it because it shores up the visual image of where money starts from and then where it finishes at. So if you want to have a good, complex political viewpoint, you can't just focus on municipal and you can't just focus on federal or the state. You got to look at it like a large pie.
Mm-hmm. You are correct.
Very convincing. You've convinced the naive Slim to now take a look at the broader picture.
Well, it also highlights the importance of your local and state elections. And normally, those are low turnout elections. And except for the years that coincide that we have a presidential election. And even those, less than half the people that are registered to vote go out and vote. And that's why, in election years, like when, say, Trump got in there, people sat home because they thought Hillary was going to win. And then we
That's
also
probably why Hillary lost.
Yeah. And you were correct. But they also had another third party that siphoned off a few votes. But
Green and Libertarian, yep.
Yes. Hillary ran a very bad campaign.
Very much so.
And ran as like she was going to trump this guy or just kill him. But it was very bad campaign. And now we're going to be suffering for the next 30 years just because of the governors, the judges that she put in, that 90% of them aren't even qualified. Even the one that's down there, you look at it as an example of the one down there in Florida, and also the ones down there in Texas that they're running all these bills to. They're doing the Confederate Party is running a lot of their social issues through one set of one set of judges, and running up to the appeals court that Trump has put all these crooks in, and it's going way up, and we're changing society. So we are having our rights taken away from, and we're heading in a negative or going backwards as a people, as they say. But you mentioned the Libertarian Party, and you go onto the website or whatever, and you talk about libertarians, and they stand for, if you correct me now, for individual rights, free markets, and peace. And I guess the most powerful libertarian in the government is Rand Paul. And I used to live in Kentucky for about 4 years, and I haven't seen anything that he's done for Kentucky in 4 years than when I was there. So, but you look at individual rights, but we look at all the rights that they're taking away from us now. And then, so what do you think about the Libertarian Party, and just how do you fight and try to slow down and stop them taking rights away, especially when you have a crooked Supreme Court?
I want to begin with a little bit of my own voting history on that one, because when I became a voting age, that was in 2004, days before the presidential election. I was more conservative at the time. I actually voted for Bush. 2008, that's the first time I started to swing libertarian. I was a libertarian for many a year. And that was Bob Barr, followed by 2 consecutive Gary Johnsons in 2012 and 2016. Now, right around 19 and 20, I get more of an understanding of being not too much caring into the federal taxation, federal spending. So because of that, I could afford to support programs that are more what would be considered progressive Democrat, like Medicare for all and such. So now I'm a progressive. My views have changed. But in my time as a Libertarian Party, I never joined, but I just liked the ideology. You're right about the basics. It's individual liberty, a lot of market-friendly stuff. So it sounds good on paper. And if they say they're the party of principle, okay, you get a point for being a principle. But what does that do now what is the message that you're fighting for in a given moment? If you believe that there is so much of many different communities that need to get better just to get onto the same page as, say, the white community, for instance, then the Libertarian Party would see the actions of trying to fix that be an affront to their individual rights and such, so they don't even help bring up to an equal playing field. Thusly, people like me leave the libertarian ideology, because that seems like the perfect thing to be after everyone is sufficiently well off and of sufficient rights. But until such point as that doesn't exist, you need a little bit more action to build everyone back up together. And there's only certain parties that even wish to do that. For instance, the Green Party is even more policy-wise active on wanting to change things for the better than, say, the Democrat Party would be. Just as a comparison, because people would be like, the Libertarian guy would be the vote splitter from the Republicans, and the Green Party would be the vote splitter from the Democrats. And I would also view that perhaps those are just too easy to say, and it allows for the lack of institutional change that needs to happen within, say, a Republican Party and a Democrat Party. Broadly, that's how I might view that. But just generally, I would say that it seems like the Libertarians are what we all wish to be based on their rhetoric, but they could be a hurdle in terms of getting to there, because they view changing society for the better as a negative toward their own dogma. And I think that is misplaced.
It's interesting that you said could be a vote splitter. And yes, the Libertarian Party or the Green Party siphons off enough votes of people in power. It's just like George Walker Bush had a third party candidate of Ross Perot that took I forgot how many percentage, but
10%.
10%, but it
1992
was
was
enough for
10%.
him to go home. He lost his election. Jimmy Carter had a third party guy in there, and that's why he went home. And then so that puts a red flag out.
Ralph Nader too in 2020,
Ralph Nader.
2000. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a red flag for this upcoming presidential election, especially when, regardless of your what you want to achieve in the next 4 years, our democracy is going to be at stake this time, because we have a guy that is running, the former president, that says he is. I don't think he'll ever leave that office, and I think what he will do to America. He's already said that he is going to change things and turn the Justice Department on people. He put the military out there. I mean, he's just going to tear up the Constitution if you look at all the rhetoric that he's talking about. And it's going to be a dangerous time for everybody in this country. And basically, our country will not be what it is today. And then so, in the analysis of it, a vote for any third party is a vote for this crook or mafia boss that is running on the other side, or the Confederate Party that's trying to run this 3-time indicted, 2-time impeached crook.
So and what? Be indicted again in the future.
Yes. So yeah. So what do you think about that?
As someone who has been, for instance, a Libertarian Party voter before, I'm still not fully away from the idea that that vote wasn't something that was necessarily taken away from a Republican or a Democrat vote. I say it's just as likely that a voter for a Green Party member otherwise wasn't going to vote on election day at all due to a lack of enthusiasm drop. If they're voting Green Party, they didn't like what they were seeing out of the Democrats. And in a lot of issues with the heavy market stance and pro-gun, individual rights, leave me alone type crowd, which you think that might go to the Republicans. If there's a heavy libertarian turnout, that means that they weren't that interested in the Republican Party. So I think a greater way to face the issue of it's now or never, you need to vote to stop the other, would only be 100% accurate if it was just the Democrat and the Republican running. But I think what that does is create too much of an angst-ridden my way, the highway, that there isn't a good ability to generate a higher than normal turnout than like you would if you had a third party, because people then could vote in such a way that they don't feel like they have to do it for fear of like death of the entire republic, as close as it could still be. For instance, the most in tune I ever was in politics was of the 4 years of the Trump presidency. And I was watching news every night because of that. But in the end, I wouldn't necessarily say it was Gary Johnson's fault or Jill Stein was the Green Party candidate in 2016's fault, so much as, for instance, you mentioned, and I agreed with, that Hillary had a bad campaign. If there was simply a way that people were able to like her more, then Trump never would have happened. The more I try to analyze it and hear from the type of news stories I watch on YouTube, for instance, are very Democrat heavy podcasts and shows. And even now they're talking about how Trump is sort of running, at least to them, they believe that running just to get, a better brand at the end. He didn't even really want to win. He wanted to figure out another way to gin up more of his personal wealth, and they thought the presidency would help. Mm-hmm. And somehow he stumbled into actually winning or something to that effect. And for some reason, that makes me remember the phrase, Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line type of situation. But that type of formula could change if the Republican Party finds someone they actually love. And for some reason, there's a vibe that they like about Donald Trump. If you find a Democrat Party candidate that really creates that same sort of vibe feel that people like, then I think the numbers are pretty much always going to play out that they should beat the Republican Party no matter how much they like Trump. So you need, I would say, to that instance, you need to find the best possible Democrat candidate. Then you don't have to worry about Trump's possible threats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Comrade, let me switch just a little bit. We're getting close to 7:30 hour, but as there's a lot of talk about the banning or the control of the history, specifically Black history, and as we look at Florida, because they're the most publicized, and there are a few other states that are following suit as far as trying to control what kind of history is taught. Uh, just Florida, the latest thing, cartoon with Frederick Douglass talking to the little children, and it's probably a cartoon because they probably couldn't find anybody or pay anybody any amount of money to portray Frederick Douglass and say, because nothing he said in that cartoon was, if you read anything by Frederick Douglass or familiar with his teachings or his comments or his writings, that was not an accurate portrayal of anything that Frederick Douglass would say. So I'm asking that on a personal level, as you were coming up through school, how much of the history, specifically Black history, talking about slavery, were you exposed to? And if you were exposed to it, was it something that offended you or made you say, wow, I feel bad about this? Some of the reasons that people are giving for trying to control what kind of history is taught in our schools because of the students of your persuasion might be offended or affected by it. If you had those opportunities to learn some of the history when you were coming up through school, were you offended? If you got that, or just talk a little bit about that.
To think of it visually, I remember enjoying learning civics and social studies when I was in middle and high school. It was a topic that the information stuck with me better than, say, English or math did. So I was the type of person that they wanted to speak to because, I enjoyed this type of stuff. But I'm from Virginia Beach, so a lot of Black history would sort of be based on where they funnel it into, which would be Black History Month. And what they choose to make the curriculum is how I ever come about it, because it's not like the internet was pretty big in the late 90s and the early 2000s to the point where I would easily be able to look up and have the willingness to more on that subject. So the issue would be, how much are they willing to feed me the information that I otherwise need? I have a much better understanding now, and I graduated college over 10 years ago. So it's because of that. I would like Florida to be more open to expanding the base of knowledge from Black history and make it more than just the idea that slaves until 1865, and then suddenly it's a lot more peachy, because it wasn't. And for over another 100 years, and still now, it's not fully where it needs to be. How do you come to that conclusion? You need to be able to understand history per decade, every decade, and don't just sort of stop it like the amount of Black history you're able to understand is from what they feed you in a textbook, which is based more on big events and not maybe so much the personalities and what exactly they were all fighting for. It just became memorized to the test type of situation. For instance, right now I'm remembering on another subject. I can remember being told about the Trail of Tears, for instance, but I'm not able to give you that much more than just, okay, they gave blankets. Some of them had smallpox on it. You need to have more unpacked from that to fully understand where exactly the nefarious came from, who was the ones who were doing it. And that's where the issue comes in with, say, Florida, because they don't fully want, and went to a lot of school board meetings and school boards in Virginia Beach. A lot of those parents echo the same rhetoric you're coming out of Florida, which is to say that there's a parental right to not letting your child see something like that and thus feel that they are bad because of something that sounds like whites in general are bad because of what they've done over the years. And I think that's actually showing you how important it is to teach this, because that's not necessarily what the messaging is. It becomes like a message of fear from the parents down. You shouldn't learn this because you are good. And that stunts your ability to fully understand where there are issues in the current society, which is why if you just wanted to click on the subject of CRT, critical race theory, which is what they're trying to take out of schools and universities and Florida, and they would probably want to do that in Virginia too if they could, because I think philosophically Youngkin and DeSantis are probably very, very similar. In that instance, you want to give the information in a more digestible format so someone like myself, who would have been an elementary or middle or high school kid, could fully understand the dynamics of the power struggle. And then they could probably help identify issues that need fixing now via this fashion. But if you denied the history being taught, you don't have a full understanding of, for instance, that thing you were mentioning about Frederick Douglass was a PragerU video that they're trying to make in curriculum in Florida. And some of their other videos aren't particularly good too. I think they had one when Robert E. Lee statues were coming down in Virginia and such, where they were trying to say the truth about Robert E. Lee, how good of an individual he is, sort of bad-mouthing how bad it is that he owned slaves and how good it was that he caught the radical John Brown. They used the word like the radical, but they didn't use radical to describe someone who owned people. This is the type of rhetoric you just need to change it a bit so we could fully treat history the way it should be, which makes your understanding of the present better, and things that you want to advocate for when you're running for a local or state or federal office changes for the better when you fully understand what has come before.
Yeah, and that's why it blows my mind with anybody that's getting on board with that kind of policy change, when all the kids are exposed to so much on social media, or if they go to some of the old movies that portray certain things, like you mentioned the Trail of Tears, the Trail of Tears by the indigenous people that were sort of driven out of the United States by their homeland. And like you said, it's more to that than just knowing about that trail that they took, that long trail that they took out of the United States. And hopefully that a lot of us will wake up to what's going on. I think Florida is hopeless as long as DeSantis is there and has those people that control the curriculum are going to be in lockstep with him. But I think it's just so important for us to make sure we keep that history in the schools with that little bit of time that we have those students in there, with all the time they have to look at all these other things that might not be exactly the truth. So,
But I think we're at the tail end or at the other end of the dumbing down of the educational system in America. And I believe that it really started with the Leave All the Children Behind Act passed by the Bush administration during that time, where we started to not teach on critical thinking, but we went to get standardized tests and looking at test scores. And if you could recite, in what it is today, if you could recite what was in the book, you don't have to understand it, but you could pass this test and then you move on to the next grade. And so that is one of the things that started this problem. And then the other piece is, you mentioned Governor Youngkin and DeSantis down there in Florida being in the same vein. The only difference between the two is that DeSantis has the overwhelming majority in the House and the Senate, so they can get by and pass anything that they want. But in the state of Virginia, the Senate is Democratic, and
Blue wall.
that nonsense that DeSantis wants to get away. I mean, Youngkin wants to get through, and so they are still the same, and they still have the
They
same.
just don't have the same power.
Yes, and they have the same vests, and so they will try to be the same, and they all want to get to do this on a national level. But it also, you talked about CRT, which is taught nowhere except in theory in law school.
Yep.
But this whole discussion that DeSantis in the Republican or Confederate Party talks about, it's all race-based discussion, and how do I gin up my base? And the quickest thing to do is on social issues and talk about race, and then we have to call them out when they mention, say, CRT. You have to call them out, saying you are a what? A racist, and get them to explain it. They can't tell you what woke means, what the meaning and what CRT is, and get a broader discussion of it. And you talk about how they talk it on the national and state level, and you talked about also down in how it's echoed down here in say in some of the school board meetings, just to be challenged in them to see the idiocy that they don't even know what the meaning is of that discussion. And so we have to talk about that and see how idiocy that is, and the lunacy of it, and the effects of it. Because if you don't know your history, then you will repeat it in the future.
Yeah, I would point to the fact that Virginia Beach in 1963 is when it became incorporated. So that's when the little resort strip of Virginia Beach merged with Prentiss Anne County. But that coincidentally happened to be right around the time there was a mass migration, if you will, from cities like Norfolk into a town like Virginia Beach to escape what they viewed as too much pro-civil rights action in Norfolk. This is right around the time of massive resistance, which you can point to. This is where you start to get the notion of school choice coming in, because you want to avoid what is becoming a very too inclusive, too diverse school system in Norfolk. Hence why the governor of Virginia, which got to point out was a Democrat at the time, was very anti that. So we're going to close down all the schools and that, and then people who were themselves didn't want to be in that type of mixed school system would then move to Virginia Beach in order to get away from something like that. So even locally, we have an example of this history. So how do you get better? You need to understand where it was first. And CRT is a little too reductive. And you're right, it's too focused on a law school curriculum. But the basics of it could still be kind of talked about in school. And if you talk about it and get more kids who are like a younger version of me reading it, they would be less likely to support something that keeps that power structure as it is, which seems like that means that would, over the years, diminish the turnout generally for the Republican Party and increase the turnout generally for the Democrat Party, because it all began as to how do you form the minds. So this is why school has been and will be such a strong fight, is because I think that this is viewed in a long-term prism. How do we get more voters in the future? If you make it so white people are uncomfortable talking about race, then those who do, like the Democrat Party, because they want to try and fix things, that means that less and less people who are like myself would vote for them. And that's where it appears like that could be why they're doing it in the first place.
Yes.
Okay. Well, look, we are at the 7:32 hour. And Conrad, I want to thank you for being a part of our inaugural series of hosts with the citizens talk, hosts and citizens talking. And like we're going to continue to, and we're going to bring you back. I'm sure many times if you agree to come back as we discuss different things, either with the citizens and then other shows that we might have. And but before we go, let people know how they can keep up with you, follow you with your social media platform.
I've got a couple right off the bat. Myself, Conrad Chesviner on Facebook. I also have a page that I used to run when I was in running for office. Now it's more just talking about politics all the time. Conrad Chesviner for Virginia. I'm in a group called the Community Action Team, or the 757 Battle Cats, and we focus specifically on trying to watch local city councils, what they're doing, and we grade them on a scale. And hopefully, coming up very soon, will be a Portsmouth report card, so people can understand how review they have done in the past 6 months. So look out for that, the Community Action Team. And of course, I do shows as well. I've been on the Beach Brothers show as a co-host with Mr. Seiko Varner, who would be a great guest here too if you want to reach out to him. And of course, I just started a channel called Shez Who, as you see that underneath my name on YouTube. And my very first show was interviewing a Chase Oliver from Atlanta who is running for the Libertarian presidential nomination. I look to have many more videos on that in the future. So I would be grateful if you guys all tuned in.
Yeah, I would encourage people to go to your YouTube channel and watch that interview with that libertarian candidate you had there. Very insightful interview, and you'll get a good idea of where the libertarians stand. And like the colonel mentioned, their basics, ideologies, but he went in depth of how he felt about a lot of issues, and I think a lot of people might agree with him. And just to end, do you think the Libertarian Party will ever gain any kind of traction that can be effective? I know you all talked earlier about how sometimes the votes they might pull away might affect some of the majors, but I think we are long overdue probably for a third party, but it takes a long time for a third party to gain the kind of traction or that they need to really be effective but the candidates that run are very serious about the run that they make as far as making the circuit run as far as being president. So do you think the Libertarian Party or any other third party will ever get to the point where they will have enough people to be effective, or to put the two-party system on notice, that they're not the only game in town?
I think a little bit of the structure would need to change first in terms of how the voting comes across. First past the post system means that whoever finishes with 50+1 is going to win, which also negatively affects primary races, and thus it makes it harder and harder for differing voices to spring up. I think there's a pretty good chance this coming cycle for the Green Party to be very nationally prominent, because they have likely Dr. Cornel West as the candidate for that, and that's going to generate a lot of support. But in the end, is that enough to get to at least 5% support, which would mean there's federal help in keeping that party on the ballot in all the states? And we were so close in 2016 to that happening because Trump and Hillary Clinton at the same time were very unpopular, but they just happened to be the top two candidates. So the third is when they should have had their zenith. They sort of collapsed toward the end. It's theoretically possible, but I don't think it's very likely until we make like ranked choice voting and sort of end first past the post system.
Okay, thanks a lot. Colonel, any last words before we go? And before you say that, Leah, I see you watching, and we miss you today. I hope you feel better. And I saw you said, "Oh my God, bring him back," because I know you want to be a part of the conversation with Conrad in the future. So get better, feel better, and just know we miss you. Colonel, any last words before we tune out here?
Yes, Conrad, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Great conversation. But I'll summarize when we talked about the third parties, because you have to watch. People need to watch out about third party, because we're running into a situation now where, say, a party like the No Labels Party, and Joe Manchin is who is a semi-Democrat, but he's more of a Republican.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Is being boosted up or pushed forward to run in No Labels party, but you look at where the money is coming from. It's coming from dark money of billionaires from the Republican Party.
Same with the RFK.
Yes, so they want to push him forward so he'll pull off more votes from Joe Biden. Now you mentioned Conway West, who has no chance of doing anything. His money is coming from the Republican Party because they want him to pull a segment of votes, because of his skin color, he thinks that they could pull that a few votes away from Joe Biden. And so if you look at between the reason we have Joe Biden in here, other than Comrade Trump, Trump is
you ready to insult Conrad there.
Yeah. 83,000 votes spread out over 3 or 4 or 5 states. And that piece will, if you flip those votes or take those votes away, you have a dictator back in office. So I think that we have to watch that. So,
all right. So
yes.
Thank you, Colonel, and appreciate it. And thanks everybody for watching Portsmouth Coffee Talk this morning. And please continue to join us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.